You are listening to part 100 of our series, 7 Medicines, The Wise Woman Way with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio. Hello, Susan. Welcome to Time Monk Radio.
Thank you, Gemini. Here we are at our 100th show on the 7 Medicines. I think when I first sent you the outline, there were about 35 shows outlined, huh?
Yes.
And yet, as we have, the privilege of having this time to just delve deeply into subjects and to turn up nuances and to talk about various connections has been so rich and so rewarding for me. As I said at the beginning of the month, it's with intense gratitude and great joy and also sadness that this is my last show for a while. I will be back, but there's going to be a hiatus of some months while I am working on putting this information into a book, because as much as I love stories, I love books too. And the last story that I have to tell about the 7 Medicines is even a little bit further away from me. The first story was a story of trauma that I experienced, and so I had a lot to say about it. And the second story was a story written out so that I could read from it from a person that I know pretty well and know some of the circumstances of her life and what's going on here. This story is not a story that I am that much involved with, but I think it's an important story because it's a story that, well, let me put it this way. It's a story that tells us, as a book that I read to my granddaughter is titled, Strange Things Can Still Sometimes Happen. So this story starts with a woman who got in touch with me because she had received a cancer diagnosis. And she was, well, I think maybe annoyed is the right word to use. And I at first I thought, what, is she annoyed at herself? Is she annoyed at her body? But she wasn't. She had actually been reading my books and following my radio shows and my blog talk for quite some time, and she was quite well settled into drinking nourishing herbal infusions and working with the both and approach of the wise woman tradition, so that whatever is happening to us becomes our ally, and we are not going to waste any energy on shame, blame, and guilt. She said, that she considered herself really one of the last people in the world who should have received a cancer diagnosis. And yet, nothing is guaranteed. And so there she was. And she was quite concerned because the standard of care for the diagnosis that she had was quite severe. And she was not feeling at ease about the severity of the treatments that she was expected to undergo. After she had the biopsy and received the diagnosis, and of course there was that waiting period between the biopsy and the diagnosis, and she told me that quite possibly that had been the hardest part for her, because she fancied herself a woman of action, and it was difficult to not be able to act, to have a very strong feeling that something was amiss in her body, to seek out that diagnosis, and then to simply have to wait. And when she did indeed go to the physician who'd done the biopsy and get the diagnosis, that physician said to her, well, this, and this will have to happen. She said that perhaps if she hadn't had that wait for the diagnostic report, she wouldn't have been so stunned and so hurt by what she was told. But she said, in a way, perhaps it was also good because it was rather galvanizing. She said she looked at that physician and she said, no, not me. I am not going to do that. And the doctor looked at her and said, of course you will. It's the only thing to do. And she told me that those words echoed in her mind. It's the only thing to do. And she thought, why is it the only thing to do? Of course it's not the only thing to do. It can't be said that this is the only thing to do. Surely there are other things to do. That's the thing that Western medicine does. But what do other kinds of medicine do? She began to do some research. She became her own expert, having the diagnosis in hand and having access to the internet. She was able to discover that the kind of cancer that she was diagnosed with was not the kind of cancer that was going to leap up, grab her by the throat, and have her for breakfast. That it was, in fact, what was known as an indolent cancer. Granted, the standard of care that everybody has, there's no choice, offered a 90% cure rate. But she thought about that 10%. That meant that 10% weren't cured, and she wondered what the cure rate would be for not doing what was suggested. And when she asked around, she was told there was no figures for that because no one had ever refused to do the standard care, at least so far as they knew. Well, she said, that both frightened her and intrigued her. No one else had ever refused to do what you're saying has to be done. I'm sure that with a cancer that is indolent, that's not going to be moving fast, that I can do something, and I want medical support. And then another biopsy. I want to see what I can do to reverse this. And her doctor said, you have to accept the standard of care. That's what we do. And she said, you're not answering my question. I want to know, will you give me 60 days, 90 days, 120 days? What do you think is safe? I'm not accepting the standard of care. I'm going to go do something else. I don't even know what it is. And I want to come back for another biopsy. How long? And she got 120 days. Together, we talked about what her options were. And the first thing that I talked about with her, the first thing I talk about to anyone who has a cancer diagnosis is medicinal mushrooms. Eating medicinal mushrooms is certainly part of lifestyle medicine. Eating shiitake, eating turkey tail, eating any kind of mushroom, even the button mushrooms from the store, so long as they're not canned, is going to give us resistance to cancer. But when we have a cancer diagnosis, we want to up our mushroom intake, and we want to turn them into alternative medicine. Mushrooms, even if they come in capsules, aren't pharmaceutical medicine because they aren't manufactured. They are grown and then powdered and then put in capsules, or grown and tinctured and put into bottles. But that's different than the manufacturing process in which we simply take one part of a plant or a mushroom. So these are truly whole foods, and the literature on the prevention of metastatic process by those who have a cancer diagnosis and who are using mushrooms is very, very strong indeed. As a matter of fact, I said, I'm glad you're coming to me now, and I want to get the information out to people that even while you're waiting for the biopsy results, you can start taking mushrooms right there. If you suspect cancer strongly enough that a biopsy is being done, then you suspect it strongly enough to start taking mushrooms. Now, I am a simpler, and I use one plant at a time, but the mushrooms don't like it that way. Mushrooms are communalists. Mushrooms like to work together. If shiitake has X ability and maitake has Y ability, then when you put them together, you don't have X plus Y, you have X times Y ability. So in taking mushrooms, I usually, and it's very rare for me, do buy product, whether it's the whole mushrooms, powdered, again, in tincture or in powders that can be taken, or whether it's the mycelium from which the fruiting body grows, either as a powder or as a tincture. The more, the merrier when it comes to mushrooms. The kind of cancer that she had been diagnosed with, which was a reproductive and estrogen-sensitive cancer, I suspected may be responsive to turkey tail mushroom. Paul Stamets tells some amazing stories about turkey tail mushroom. It is certainly one of the mushrooms that he is in an enviable position to talk about, because his product of turkey tail mushroom capsules, which contains turkey tail mycelium, over 500 milligrams of polysaccharides and 5 milligrams of fatty acids, certified organic, are in his capsules, and he got that to be used in a study by the National Cancer Institute of people who had a cancer diagnosis. So we know that the particular turkey tail that is coming from host defense has been shown in human studies to reverse cancers. Interestingly enough, it worked at a 3-gram dose. It worked at a 6-gram dose, but 6-gram dose was more effective. And it worked at a 9-gram dose, and 9 grams was also effective. And there were no side effects from doses like that. I asked her what kind of mind medicine she would be interested in engaging with. You notice that I jumped ahead into alternative medicine with the mushrooms. And I did that right away because I wanted her to be able to think with me and to be able to step away from the fear. And I have found that people with a diagnosis are dealing with fear. It's not perhaps quite as bad as it was 50 years ago. The word cancer no longer makes us think that someone is going to immediately die, but still in all, we think of a diagnosis of cancer as being a terminal diagnosis, and we have to work hard to change our thoughts and to change our minds about that particular thing. So I jump in with mushrooms, which helps to really damp down the fear because it's going to prevent metastatic process, and then roll back to engaging the energy. I find that for people with the diagnosis of cancer, a variety of mind medicines can be used to good effect. My mentor, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, was very much into visualization, and she liked to have people visualize their cancers being destroyed. And she would often encourage people to think about bombs or whatever was doing that. She was not so young child in Switzerland during World War II. So although she wasn't bombed, there were lots of bombs around and about, and definitely some privations because of what was going on. Affirmations also are, I think, very, very important. One of my favorite affirmations for someone with a cancer diagnosis is a ditty that somebody sang for me. I'll see if I can sing it for you. Every single cell in my body is a healthy cell. Every healthy cell is a cell that's well. Every single cell in my body is a healthy cell. Every healthy cell is a cell that's well. Affirmations are a wonderful way to move past the fear. Certainly, affirming that every cell in my body is a healthy cell, if I have a biopsy diagnosis of cancer, can be called wishful thinking. On the other hand, miracles occur because of wishful thinking. It's not the only thing we're doing. I find, especially when we're dealing with cancer, that oncologists can furrow their brows about energy medicine as though they somehow thought that we were saying that this is all we're going to do. No, it is part of what we're going to do because it is important to affirm that my body heals rapidly and well and that every single cell in my body is a healthy cell. So, mind medicine, would it be homeopathy? Do you know that there are homeopaths who actually specialize in the treatment of cancer? Mm-hmm. Would it be special kind of energy work? Did she want somebody to do therapeutic touch or Reiki on her on a regular basis? Mind medicine. Does she have faith? Is she part of a religious community? Does she want to pray? Does she want other people to pray for her? How far out does she want the word to get about her diagnosis? It's interesting to me that the story of our diagnosis is often a story that we like to keep quiet. Even if we're not blaming ourselves, we seem to have an inherent understanding that other people might very well blame us. What other things did I suggest for mind medicine? I know that there are people around with orgone boxes, and that's a possibility. And there are rice machines. We live near a large metropolitan area, and I know that there are people with rice machines down in that metropolitan area, and she should perhaps, check into what a rice machine is, and if it appealed to her, or gemstones, or any of the thousands of other mind medicines, and that she should let me know what it was that she was going to do. But she should neither ignore mind medicine nor put her faith solely in mind medicine. Moving then to lifestyle medicine, there were a few food recommendations that I thought could be important for her. One, in reproductive cancers, biopsied people who ate a flaxseed muffin containing at least 3 tablespoons of ground flax daily for 6 weeks eliminated their tumors or shrunk them by half. Yes, women with breast cancer, men with prostate cancer who had a diagnosis of cancer through biopsy, when given a flaxseed muffin containing at least 3 tablespoons of ground flax, cooked in that muffin on a daily basis, were able to get rid of their cancer or to dramatically shrink it. It's worth a try. Will it work or won't it work is not so much our question. We talked a little bit about that last week. Of course it works. It all works. I've seen people healed of cancer by tying a red string around their wrist. Even stranger, I've seen people healed of cancer by doing chemotherapy. Bit of a risky business. So consider flax. Also consider carrot juice. Flax and carrot juice and green tea are 3 of my top cancer-fighting food picks, and they're not that hard to get into your diet. Cup of green tea, matcha is my favorite, a flaxseed muffin, and a cup of carrot juice. Not all at once, that would probably roil anyone's stomach, but as those in-between meal snacks can go a long way toward changing your diagnosis. Because I'm an herbalist, and she was consulting with me, she pushed me to talk about herbs that could get rid of the cancer. And I said, well, we've talked about mushrooms, and it really is possible that the mushrooms could very well get rid of the cancer, but there are also some other herbs that are pretty strongly known for being herbs that get rid of cancer. The one that I possibly have the most faith in is poke root, Phytolacca americana, and I can't even really tell you what I base my trust in. It's not as though it's a plant that has been tested with hundreds or even scores of people, and we would contrast that to celandine, Chelidonium majus. And celandine has been tested in Eastern Europe in over 400 cases, including cases of pancreatic cancer, in which a extract of the leaf and root of celandine has actually shrunk and reversed that kind of cancer. Pancreatic cancer and a variety of other cancers that they tried it against. Celandine does not grow everywhere, and in general, only preparations made from fresh celandine are considered to be powerful enough to deal with cancer, and that's true of poke too. Phytolacca americana, poke, does not grow everywhere, and the tincture needs to be made from the freshly dug root in order to have full potency and to be as powerful as it needs to be. Mistletoe and sundew are other herbs that are considered very strongly anti-cancer. They, however, are not as easy to get a hold of as celandine and poke, because I'm going to be doing a video about integrative cancer treatments. I've been kind of saying to my daughter, is that mistletoe? Is that mistletoe? And finally she said to me, you're seeing mistletoe everywhere. And I had to admit that I was, and yet none of it was mistletoe. It's not that easy to find, unless, of course, you're in the British Isles, where there's quite a bit of it, and perhaps that's why mistletoe therapy, which is often an injection, is still done in Europe. I go over many more herbs that can be used against cancer in my book, Breast Cancer ? Breast Health ! But I really needn't have gone over that many with her because she settled in on poke. Perhaps it's simply because it's my personal favorite, or perhaps she also felt an affinity for it because we could see a beautiful poke root plant right outside my window while she and I were talking. And I told her who she could get fresh poke root tincture from, and we discussed in some detail how to harvest it when the time came that fall so that she could have her own poke root tincture. I suggested that the safest way to work with it was to take a drop for the first day, and then a drop for the second day, and then 2 drops for the third day, and 2 drops for the fourth day, and so on, moving up a drop every other day. And she asked if she could move up a drop a day, and I said, well, yes, but if you get any symptoms like diarrhea or nausea or visual disturbances, then do back off, and often people need to back off to even 1/10 of what they have been taking. Green tea, of course, as I said, is loaded with antioxidants, but we don't want to take vitamins, and I did indeed caution her against taking any kind of supplement at all since she had a diagnosis, especially not antioxidant supplements like vitamin C or vitamin E, which have a very ambiguous and not happy relationship with the cancer altogether. She called to tell me the news after her 120 days, and then another bit of time after the biopsy was up. And she said that when at last they got the biopsy results, what it showed was that the cancer was regressing, and it seemed to be less pushy than it had been before. She told me some of the things that she was going to do to step up what was happening, and she was very pleased indeed that she did not need to accept the standard of care, which of course involved a lot of high-tech diagnosis and high-tech treatment, and that instead she could work with the simple blessings of the earth. She could work with visualization. She could work with herbs and greens and her nourishing herbal infusions. She could work with her intention and homeopathy and all of the wonderful, wonderful ways that we as human beings have created to heal. I look forward to hearing from her at some point in the future that she has gone back for a biopsy and they can't find any cancer in her biopsy at all. I did also mention to her that while any healthy whole food diet would just fine for someone with a cancer diagnosis, that she might want to consider a macrobiotic diet, as it was one of the few diets that has actually actively been shown to reverse cancer. Oh, and so the spiral takes another turn, and so the weaver weaves another shuttleful. When we come to the end of the yarn and our shuttle, we pull the beater up tight against what we've woven, and we get up. We go off and we see if the sheep have been sheared, and if the wool has been spun, and if the wool has been dyed, and if there is fiber ready for us. And when we find that, we bring it back. We bring it back to our shuttle and we continue our weavings. And so it will be for all of us. We've come to the end of this shuttle. I will be out and about. I will be home and alone. But I will be finding the next material for the next shuttle, so that when we are again together, that together we can reweave the healing cloak of the ancients and reestablish herbal medicine to its rightful place as people's medicine. Thank you so much for all the support, Gemini.
Thank you, Susan. We are humbled, delighted, and far wiser having shared our time with you over the last 2 years. We look forward to your new book and wish you the very best as you continue your gifts of healing, storytelling, and sharing your extensive knowledge of the Earth's green blessings. And this will conclude part 100 of our series, The 7 Medicines the Wise Woman Way, with Susan Weed at Time Mac Radio.